I just love how Jordan leans into this. It's just fun to say. Gadzooks. First scene that Jordan did right was the sunken place scene.
Hey, it's Tasha Wheelhouse with Copper Shock. I freaked out when watching Get Out, and you will too. This is the horror film we need right now.
So what is the film Get Out? A young African-American visits his white girlfriend's parents for the weekend, where his simmering uneasiness about the reception of him eventually reaches a boiling point. This is amazing because this can just as easily and versatilely be applied to Who's Coming to Dinner from 1967. That film is about a young white woman who is bringing home a black man to meet her parents, but her parents don't know he is black. I do find it funny that Guess Who's Coming to Dinner and Jordan Peele's Get Out were exactly 50 years apart. Now, initially, I was going to comment about the brilliance of the fact an old romantic comedy premise has been turned on its head into a horror. In fact, it's a really good writing exercise. You could take a romantic comedy like How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, and then how do you turn that into a horror film? More than talking about that, I do want to kind of bring up the fact that it's humbling and a little sad that the exact same premise around racist ideals of bringing someone home still applies exactly 50 years later. I have a great admiration for the film Get Out. I want to study it. I wanted to put together this video essay for you to enjoy and to engage with me and to talk about it. And while we talk about it, we are going to discuss the themes within it, which much of it goes around social racism, so please be kind in the comments. So the thing about the Get Out movie, should you watch the trailer ahead of watching the movie, or even watching this video? Honestly, if you have not seen Get Out, I would jump in feet first. Maybe not for your 10-year-old kid, I do think it would give them nightmares, because it's a pretty good psychological thriller. But if you have not seen this film, go watch it, come back, I'll be here for you, and we'll go. Getting into the history of Get Out, talking about its reviews, its ratings, how was it received when it was first distributed to everybody? Get Out was released prior to 2020, which means that for its time, it would have been released with a traditional studio schedule. That means advertising it like crazy, and then putting it into theaters where everyone was expected to go see it. And Get Out was scheduled to be released on February 24th of 2017. This is my personal opinion. I think if a studio decides to release a horror film in February, they just don't have that much faith in it. And if I'm wrong about that, like, please comment below. I'd love to learn more about that culture. Because the thing about horror films in their budgeting is they are given a shoestring budget for the Avengers films where, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars being spent on it. And then you've got Get Out, which was a budget of $4.5 million. This is actually very common for horror films, especially in untried intellectual property, because Get Out was an entirely new original concept. Now, Get Out wasn't just some sleeper hit where the audiences eventually found it. This was a home run. Budget of $4.5 million, but at the box office, they made $255.4 million. It won 151 awards out of the 209 that this film was nominated for. Even at the Oscars the following year, not only was it nominated for Best Picture, it did win Best Original Screenplay. Jordan Peele's first script, and he got Best Screenplay. Like, I couldn't be happier for the guy. I think that is amazing. I wish I could do that as a writer. And it's not like there wasn't steep competition that year at the Academy Awards. They were going for Best Picture up against things like Dunkirk, Lady Bird, 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. So let's talk about the cast. Like, where have you seen any of these people before? I actually love being like, oh, that's that guy. I know him. First and foremost, we're going to talk about Daniel Kaluuya. Daniel Kaluuya is the main character of our film, Get Out. Prior to being in Get Out, this English-born gentleman was in a little-known TV show, maybe you've heard of it, Black Mirror. He's in one of my absolute favorite episodes. It's called 15 Million Merits. The episode that Daniel is in tells a story of the struggle of a man in a system wherein you eat, you go to work, and you wake up, and you do the same thing the next day, and the only thing that like hangs on a thread of hope is this reality TV show that everybody watches all the time. But the thing is, in order to audition, you have to be able to pay 15 million merits, which in whatever currency exists in this story is a back-breaking amount of money to try and earn in order to even just audition. The thing is, Daniel's character does this twice, and it's extremely important for both reasons why he does it. I won't spoil too much about it, but go watch it. It's amazing. Right before Get Out, Daniel had actually been out of acting work for about 2 years. An interview with Essence magazine alongside Jordan Peele, he did admit out loud, quote, "I never told you this, but when you reached out to me and we had that Skype, I was really disillusioned with acting." He was ready to quit acting. He did cite some of his frustration in the Hollywood ecosystem, that it was pent around some things that felt like racism. And Daniel's filmography has absolutely blossomed since Get Out. You might recognize him from Black Panther. He was also in Netflix's remake of Watership Down in 2018. And of course, you'd know him from Jordan Peele's recent project, Nope, in 2022. In 2021, won his first Oscar. Now, yes, I've listed projects, the bigger ones that I recognize Daniel from, but what do you remember seeing him in? Put it in the comments below. Allison Williams plays the doting girlfriend who's a little oblivious about the fact that her boyfriend's kind of uncomfortable at her parents' house. Allison was born in Connecticut in 1988, and it's really not surprising that her career trajectory led her to Hollywood because her father is Brian Williams, who is from NBC Nightly. And even recently in the last year, Allison began to answer some questions around Hollywood's nepotism. Yes, she probably had more opportunities because of the connections that her family had in media, but she's not regretful of it. In fact, to quote her from an article in People magazine, the nepotism thing, I mean, I don't really care. I look at my kids and we're a storytelling family. It's definitely in our blood. Now, this is kind of a personal comment from me. I can kind of agree with her sentiment here. I don't think it's that uncommon when families are entrenched in a specific industry for others in their family circle to also kind of latch on to those things and use that network between each other. Like, my own family is even involved in entertainment. With this family, on car rides home from the movie theater, we would break down dramatic theory, character arcs, and how they relate to each other. What was the end condition? Were there time versus option locks? I mean, this is just part of my world as a kid. So yes, Allison comes from a family of pedigree in media, but that doesn't mean that she doesn't apply herself and that she didn't earn the work herself either, which is also my opinion in that matter. She's been in really recognizable projects, HBO's Girls in 2012, but this is the project that got Jordan Peele's attention, which I think is kind of hilarious. An NBC movie of Peter Pan Live, where Allison plays the titular Peter Pan. Peter Pan is traditionally played by a woman. This tradition was started on Broadway in 1904. There were changes in labor laws to children, but because they needed someone who could work full theater hours, they decided to cast like small-framed, flat-chested women who still had a youthful look about them as a young boy. And ever since then, it's been a tradition. Peter Pan Live from NBC, this film is extra because the guy who plays Hook is Christopher Walken. I love it so much. I can't. And you know what? Jordan Peele couldn't either. So to quote Allison on why she was cast, she said, "Jordan cast me because of Peter Pan. He was like, if she could fly live on television for 3 hours with Christopher Walken walking around beneath her, she'll do anything." He wasn't wrong. He said, she's got this innocence. She played Peter Pan. Now, normally after like the two big main lead characters of a film, I wouldn't talk about the rest of the cast, but honestly, this is a very rich cast of characters, and I'd love to talk about their history. Next up, we have Bradley Whitford. My earliest memory of Bradley Whitford is when he played the jerk boyfriend in Adventures in Babysitting in 1987. That's where I recognize this guy from. And then he had a lot of bit parts, but they were all really like big television shows. Things like Malcolm in the Middle, Frasier, ER. He was in films like Bicentennial Man and Billy Madison. But in 1999, he struck the role of a lifetime in a television show called The West Wing. While a lot of the politics in The West Wing are pretty dated for today, the dialogue and the way it just kind of pops and the way they interact with each other as characters is so recognizable because that show was written by Aaron Sorkin. Because Aaron Sorkin is also the Academy Award winner for the film The Social Network in 2010. And then he got nominated again the next year for Moneyball. After The West Wing ended in 2006, Bradley got consistent on and off work again. He was in The Cabin in the Woods in 2011. In 2013, he was in Saving Mr. Banks. He's a major key player character in the television show The Handmaid's Tale. And he was also in the recent Tick, Tick, Boom. I mean, really, I think the guy's a solid choice of an actor. Cast him because he's really reliable. Now to discuss accolades, he's won 3 Primetime Emmys. 1 for The West Wing, 1 for The Handmaid's Tale, and 1 for Transparent. Moving on to Cathrine Keener. So Cathrine Keener, who plays the doctor in this film, is most recognized for a film called Being John Malkovich in 1999. She was was even nominated for Best Actress in a Supporting Role. Now, if you watch this film and you close your eyes, you can almost recognize and hear her voice because she's Elastigirl in Disney's Incredibles. Other films I recognized her from was Simone or Sim1, depending on how you read that title, because it's spelled like this. And you may also recognize her from the film The 40-Year-Old Virgin. Especially today, it's not uncommon for actors to be the characters in like an in-universe theory. I mean, it's kind of the whole plot line of No Way Home for Spider-Man. Cathrine Keener and her co-worker, who is played by John Cusack, discover a portal behind an office cabinet that if you go inside of it, you enter the mind of John Malkovich for like 15 minutes at a time. And they come up with a scheme to charge people $200 to go through this portal to be John Malkovich. And everyone finds this to be like a life-changing experience. Now, the fan theory is that after the film of Being John Malkovich in 1999, the character of Maxine then abandons her life, moves to Connecticut because she is a very impulsive person, or had been through much of that film, to pursue further mental intrusion or study of psychology because she had no moral qualms about doing it. She found the Coagula cult, but because her skill set was so unique in how she uses hypnosis, that she was actually married into the Armitage family, and therefore she's the exact same person from both films. When Vanity Fair interviewed Jordan Peele about this exact theory, he had this to say about it. I love this theory. I have heard this theory. It was definitely not lost on me that I was able to get Cathrine Keener in her second, like, weird perspective, living in someone else's brain movie. We joked about that, and I'm a huge fan of the movie Being John Malkovich. I also sat down with Spike Jonze a couple of months ago. I told him this theory myself, and he chuckled. So, as far as I'm concerned, it's true, unquote. I just love how Jordan leans into this of like, yeah, seems reasonable, have fun with it. I just love that. Next up is Kaleb Landry Jones. He's from Texas, and he's a vocalist and a drummer for a psychedelic rock band. I found his Bandcamp page. I'll put it in the description below. He's continued to write music before and after Get Out, and he released another album recently in November 2022 called Gadzooks Volume 2. It's just fun to say, Gadzooks. So yeah, he's still rocking the music life, but in between, he's still doing acting too. Kaleb's first film was No Country for Old Men in 2007. He played one of the boys on his bikes. That was like his literal first gig. But a pretty big break for him came for X-Men First Class in 2011. Now, 2017 was a pretty good year for Kaleb. Not only was he in Get Out, but he was also in 3 billboards outside Ebbing, Missouri. He was in 2 Best Picture nominated films that year. How is this guy still under the radar? All right, we've gotten to the director, Jordan Peele. Jordan Peele is a New York City boy. He was born in 1979. He was mostly known for a TV series called Key and Peele, where him and Keegan-Michael Key did really ridiculous characters together all the time. Now, Keegan-Michael Key and Jordan Peele became fast friends when they saw each other on set, and they would just make each other crack up and laugh, and they have both described their friendship as falling in comedy love. When Jordan was describing his process in writing the film Get Out, it took him 8 years. In fact, the very first scene that Jordan did write was the sunken place scene. Now, this is what Jordan had to say about that scene to The Hollywood Reporter. I knew that in some ways my movie was an allegory for slavery, but I also knew that at this point, the structure of the film, it needed to take us on a ride because it's a horror genre. I wrote this scene in a very vulnerable state. I put my worst fears out there and onto the page. And when I was finished writing that scene, the experience of writing this movie changed. I realized what this movie was about. I realized that slavery was not something of the past. The sunken place, to me, shouted to me that in today's time, in modern time, we have Black men and women abducted and put in dark holes, that we have our freedom taken away. I realized at that point that there were people being locked up and taken out of the world and taken from their families for holding less weed than I was smoking while I was writing this movie. Now, when Jordan talks more about this film, in 2017, he was a keynote speaker, that it's surprising how many B-horror movie tropes exist in this film that everybody still just kind of takes seriously and suspends disbelief for it. Tropes like brain transplants, hypnosis. He even talked about the ridiculousness of having a blind art dealer as a character. But he was pleased to see how many people took those things in stride and just kind of enjoyed the ride with him. There's a very key scene, Chris, the main character, is talking to the blind art dealer. You get this vibe that like because he's blind, then no, he wouldn't care what skin color Chris is. That he is the most reasonable person at this party in theory. Also just kind of this message around like, even if you're not directly participating in racism, if you are participating in systems that benefit you, that are built off of racism, you're still just as culpable. Because as you'll remember, the blind art dealer, while he doesn't care what skin color Chris is, the reason Chris was picked is because he was black. All right, let's explain the ending of Get Out. The family that the main character Chris is going to see is the family of his girlfriend. She belongs to a family called the Armitage family. This family runs a large, long con for the super rich via a secret cult called the Coagula. This cult was formed after the 1934 Olympics when Roman Armitage, Rose's grandfather, lost his race to Jesse Owens. And that is where it began for Roman Armitage, his obsession with the black race for their physical traits and advantages that he wanted to possess while still maintaining his white mind. However, the medical technology did not exist at the time, and in 1950, another historical event happened. Vladimir Demikov began performing and documenting his experimentation on transplanting limbs and organs of dogs to great worldwide controversy. Then in 1970, again, a real-world event, a head transplant by Robert White was performed on a rhesus monkey to another headless rhesus monkey. That monkey lived for 8 days. This is where history and speculative fantasy fiction kind of come into play. We, the audience, begin to fill in the gaps ourselves of what we understand from context. I think it stands to reason that successful brain transplants for the super rich was a very, very recent medical success within like a year, year and a half before we start seeing the story of Get Out. Here are the reasons that I believe that. Over the course of the film, we see only 3 successful examples of brain transplants: the Armitage grandfather, the Armitage grandmother, and Logan at the party. It stands to reason that the prior individuals that both Rose and her brother captured, that we don't see in the film, were transplants to each other to test run until something was successful. And that's why up through this point, Rose's brother has never had to be subtle about his capturing methods or how aggressive he was with the body. For lack of a better way of putting it, they were basically test animals for that family. It grosses and creeps me out a lot. Grandma and granddad's brain transplants were the first white people brain transplants that happened as a desperate move to evade death. I don't know if they were like 100% there. I think it's why grandma, the consciousness in her body keeps pushing a lot harder. It was a test run. Like they were like, okay, I think we're ready, enough. I think that they leaned toward Rose's honeypot method is because 1, it's a lot less damage on the goods. 2, there's a lot of mental prep work when you are being gaslit the way that Rose does for her partners. The Armitage family did not know about the flash photography thing until the day it happened to Logan, aka Andre. I honestly believe that, 1, because they would never let Rose date a photographer if they knew. It's a hazard of the job, like where if you do flash photography, the person who's never supposed to have any kind of cognitive function whatsoever suddenly becomes conscious and they have control of their motor skills again. This particular garden party was really well attended because not only had Grandma Armitage and Grandpa Armitage been successful, but there was one actual paying customer who attended the party who was like, yeah, I'm pretty happy. Things are really good. And so now the water is primed with blood sharks to come in and to pay whatever it costs for the next available livestock. This isn't so much a theory as much as it is like a cool factoid about the ending. When Chris's best friend is the one who finds him, it is true. Originally, the ending had been of actual cops showing up. They called this the sad truth ending. And producer Sam McKittrick recalls what it was like testing this ending with audiences. He said, "We tested this movie with the original sad truth ending, where the cop shows up, it's an actual cop, and Chris goes to jail. The audience was absolutely loving the movie, and then it was like we punched everyone in the gut. You could feel the air being sucked out of the room. The country was different. We weren't in the Obama era. We were in this new world where all the racism crept out from under the rocks again. It was always an ending that we debated back and forth. So we decided to go back and shoot the pieces for the other ending where Chris wins." My specific thoughts around this film, one of them had been at the very start of the film, Chris has a comment to Rose in his apartment as they're packing up to go on their road trip. He says, "Do her parents know that he's black?" back. She pauses, says, no, why? He makes a joke. He just doesn't want to get chased off the lawn with a shotgun. Chris is running for his life at the end of the film, being chased off the lawn with a shotgun, but by Rose. The song at the very beginning of the film, Run Rabbit by Flanagan and Allen, was purposefully chosen by Jordan Peele. Listen to these lyrics. Run rabbit, run, run, run. Go give the farmer his fun, fun, fun. He'll get by without his rabbit pie. So run rabbit, run, run, run. The lyrics within this song are crazy symbolic because even though it's total sport for one half of this party, for the other, it's about pure survival. Now, speaking of opening songs in this film, it's called Sikiliza. Sikiliza is Swahili for listen. This song is a warning to audiences to keep an eye out that things are not as they seem. The lyrics of this song translate to roughly this. Brother, listen to the ancestors. Run, you need to run far. Listen for the truth. Brother, listen to the ancestors. Run, you need to run far to save yourself. Listen to the ancestors. Now, Jordan did something writing-wise that I find crazy impressive. He wrote Rose with multiple Save the Cats, and one of the Save the Cats is actually a falsehood. Now, it's not uncommon for horror films to write guardian-like character to be a betrayer, and saving the cat is a great way to get someone to like a character. But we as an audience give Rose a pass early on because she's being kind, she's picking up breakfast. When she gets there, she starts playing with Chris's dog and being gentle with him. After the deer hits the car, the police are called to file an incident report, and he's like, well, I asked for his license. I didn't ask if he was driving. And she said, well, that's just racist to ask for his license because he wasn't driving. Now, she's not wrong, but she weaponizes this. This is her way of sticking up for her boyfriend, right? Oh no. No. She just did not want an authority to see his license and register him in anything in his database in his car so that when Chris inevitably goes missing in the next 2 days, there isn't any kind of record that he was with her exactly. This is kind of a fun fact. The dying deer sound at the side of the road after they hit the deer, the sound, that's Jordan Peele. At first, I was really weirded out and creeped out that Rose's gardener full on running in sprint mode at night. It's because this is his new body and he is testing the limits to try and beat Jesse Owens' time from 1934. The Armitage family dinner where Chris is having dinner with Rose's brother and her mom and her dad. Chris gets really aggressive vibes from Jeremy because I don't think Jeremy sees Chris as a person. I think he sees him as livestock, the cow that you don't give a name to because it's gonna go through the grinder in a few days. There's a really important scene I want to talk about that involves something that Jordan also talks about, which is called code switching. Code switching is this kind of social expectation of how you talk to somebody. So if I'm at a boardroom meeting, I say, thank you so much for meeting with us today. We're going to go over these metrics. I've got some data points that I really want to come across. And that's kind of versus like, if you go to a brunch, be like, gosh, I know, I love that dress. Oh, you are just so beautiful. Tell me everything. How is life? Very different conversations. So in Get Out, there's a really awesome scene where Chris is taking pictures outside of the house. He walks up to the gardener and says in a very specific affectation, they working you out here good, huh? So there's a little bit of slight grammar that's off, a little bit of slide in how he says and lilts his words. And the gardener turns back to look at him, perfectly postured, smiles, nothing I don't want to be doing. And it's perfectly articulated. Nothing's exactly wrong, but like your heckles just go up of what is happening? So here's the thing. I actually didn't notice this about this film until I watched it again for this video. Rose has rando posters all over her bedroom for the first half of the film. And it's not uncommon to go back to your parents' house after you've left when you were a teenager and you're in college, and you've still got all of your Fall Out Boy posters and all of your My Chemical Romance. But yeah, she's got all kinds of random posters, and I actually started noticing them, and I was trying to read them to see if it read into her personality in some way, because after she like breaks girlfriend character, she looks like an absolute sociopath who has no emotion. But that's the thing, is like I couldn't really find a cognitive connection between the posters because they're all set dressing. It is only after she is able to successfully capture her next victim that she takes all those posters off the wall because they hide the nail marks in the wall for where she hangs her picture frames of all of her victims. I love musing about the aftermath of this film and what an absolute cluster mess this would have been. Imagine it's after where Chris has been saved by Rod. It's the next day. Chris likely has a will and testament from blind art gallery dude giving him all of his riches because he was going to be Chris. He would be thrown into jail because Rod had reported Chris is missing at the Armitage family house. Everybody in the house is dead and the house is burned to the ground. But because he's got all those resources from blind art gallery dude, he actually has the resources to fight the system. More than that, Chris can identify all of the Coagula cult people because he had full-on conversations with them while eating hors d'oeuvres. They're in trouble. Okay, let's make this short and sweet. Thriller factor, 1 out of 10. I rate this a 9. I always wanted to know what was coming next. I always had questions about what was going to happen, and all of my questions had reasonable answers to them. Score rating, 1 to 10. Like a 4 out of 10, really. I mean, there were violent actions, but it's not like blood was gushing out onto the lens of the camera. Many did kind of happen off screen. Gore is not my vibe, so I like that this is lower on the gore rating as a horror film. Storytelling, 1 to 10. 10, guys! Like, this is like a Stepford Wives twist around the social fears of racism that still exists today that modern audiences like really resonate with. It's pretty Pulp Fiction-y, but it still delivers on a lot of original story. Really communicates well the gravity of what's at stake. I liked it, and I felt all of the characters were really compelling. Production value, legit 10 out of 10. Even the lighting, you don't notice it, you just feel it. And everything feels like it fits into place in this universe that you're visually experiencing. Toby Oliver, who is the cinematographer for this film, thought very carefully about the lighting. And you know, why not the usual like foreboding house that you see in most horror films? This is what he had to say about that. This was really deliberate. That's an idea that we had talked about in pre-production before we got anywhere near the set. We really wanted Chris's world in the city to feel really natural and real, and when they arrive at Rose's estate, it would be very warm, a golden glow to the outside and also the inside of the house. It would feel very inviting and very welcoming. When the parents meet him on the doorstep and they invite him in to show him around, everything feels nice and inviting and friendly. We want to reflect that in the color and lighting. Underneath, something is very weird and strange it's going on, which Chris slowly starts realizing. The color and the light lull the audience into a false sense of security. We sort of push that all the way through the party scene to the auction scene. Certainly after that scene, that night when he tries to leave and says, "Rose, we've got to go," and she can't find the keys, that's when we start playing around with the lighting and start to make it creepier. Rose is trying to find the keys, and Bradley Whitford's character is at the fireplace with this creepy fire reflection in his glasses, and there's a weird light coming from below. It's little cues like that that start creeping you out. At that point, Chris really knows he's got to get out. This whole family is really crazy. I started playing around with the lighting from that point on, and it swung over to more of a horror movie genre type. I love that because that means that the lighting and experience and his worldview is based off of Chris's character arc. I think that's amazing. Like CGI or the makeup, like yeah, it was a 10 out of 10 because I barely noticed it. And it just felt very natural to the world around it. Believe me, you can notice Uncanny Valley when you see it. This didn't have that at all. It was very, very natural and I thought really well executed. Here are my thoughts about Get Out. Get Out is a film that I do genuinely enjoy. It is one of my favorite horror films because I think it's just a fascinating concept. It is a film that I do recommend to friends if they're just kind of like on the fence of whether they're going to watch a horror film or not, because this has got not just slasher elements, but a lot of like social comparisons that are really interesting to dissect from a story perspective. And you know what's interesting about this film? It was directed by Jordan Peele, and Jordan Peele has said on more than one occasion, a film that has really sparked his imagination into the horror genre is 1992's Candyman. And you know what? I have broken down its entire film history over here. I hope to see you there.